Hey everyone, it's Evan Kirstel here. I have a fabulous discussion topic and guest today, chatting with Ido at Verint on the impact of the pandemic on the airline industry and its relationship with customers. A very hot topic, hot indeed as we head into the summer season with tremendous challenges facing airlines and their customers. So let's jump right in. Ido, how are you? Maybe introduce yourself, your background, and for those few people who don't know who Verint is, maybe just say a few words for the audience.
Absolutely. So very nice to meet you all. I'm Ido Bornstein-Cohen. I'm one of the global VPs here at Verint. I actually was the CEO of Conversocial, a messaging-focused company that was acquired a year ago. And for those of you who do not know Verint, Verint is one of the leaders in the customer engagement contact center space. We do everything in the contact center. So from workforce management, quality assurance, all the way through customer engagement. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. So one of our focused solutions and products is actually on the customer engagement side, enabling brands and consumers to interact with each other in a very seamless, simplistic way. From voice to chat, communities, and messaging, which is what we brought to Verint through our acquisition.
Yeah, fantastically interesting. And a particular interest to me and you today is the airline industry. We both travel a lot. I happen to be an airline aviation kind of enthusiast. And it's one of those industries we love to hate, particularly now, given all the challenges. But give us some perspective from your angle. How have airlines fared throughout the pandemic? I think we're still in a pandemic, despite many people believing otherwise. So what's happening from a CX perspective?
Yeah, well, I think this is quite a loaded question, right? Because there's the two aspects to it. One is the airline as an industry. How has it been impacted by COVID and the pandemic? And the airline industry is probably the industry who got impacted the most because they got shut down. March 2020, boom, no flights, nothing, right? As opposed to some of the other industries that we've seen, like retail, and that also got impacted, but not as drastically as the airline industry. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is how much investment has been made, from a back-end system technology standpoint within the airline industry over the last decade, or maybe more than that. And I think you and I can both agree that there needs to be more investment made into the technology that supports us as consumers from an airline standpoint. So when you think about it like that, the last year has actually propelled airlines to make a leap, a 5-year leap, probably even more, in terms of the technology that they're supporting, right? Because they had to, and I'll give a few examples, but they really had to. That's on one end. And on the other, they've had so many people reaching out to them, trying to have conversation with them, get information and so on, that they had to also frog leap the way that they're engaging with their customers from a CX perspective.
Yeah, such a great point. So a 5-year leap to digital channels of all sorts. We used to call that omni-channel, but every channel, every customer, all the time. Meeting new consumer preferences, and yet there's still this gap between the customer's real world experience and the level and quality of customer service they're getting. So why the gap, and also any examples of airlines that are really getting it right?
Yeah. So, I think that there's a few reasons when you think about the airline industry. There's a few reasons why, they're experiencing some of those gaps. When you think about the way that they're structured and from a cost perspective and the areas that they had kind of invested in or did not invest in, there's still some to be desired, specifically as it relates to, our ability to do things on our own. Right, and just let's say the flexibility by which we can, book a flight, get a refund, use some of our bonus miles, look at our status. All of those things, they kind of require changes within the technology systems, the IT systems that those airlines, have in place today. Some of them were getting ready. We've got a few examples of the low-cost airlines. The interesting things about the low-cost airlines versus the traditional airlines, the more high-scale airlines, is that one, they were formed recently. So, some of them have actually started, forming their business and putting system in place not too long ago, which means they had almost like a leg up on some of the traditional ones in terms of like the systems that they're leveraging and in terms of the way that they're thinking about customer engagement and just, customer interaction. The second thing about it is that, these companies, some of these companies have been more digital first companies, right? So one of our customers, a low-cost airlines, has actually switched, from providing customer service solely on the phone, right, to providing it solely on messaging and specifically WhatsApp, right? And they're leveraging WhatsApp as their main form of communications. Their customers are super happy about it. They could be more productive. If you think about it, very simple terms, right? If you do a phone call, right, like if a customer calls in, by average, it's going to cost you about $6, right? Because you can only do one-to-one conversations. So if I'm speaking with you, I can't speak with anybody else. And as long as you've got me on the line, that's how it's going to work, right? Which means that I have a capacity challenge, but we call it Verint, the engagement capacity challenge. More people are calling in, right? If I only maintain that one-to-one kind of conversation with the consumer through phone, I'm going to have to hire more people, right? But if you go beyond that, if you go beyond voice and you go into messaging, you suddenly can have, that customer that I was mentioning, they can have, they're having 6 or 7 conversations at the same time. Off the bat, without introducing things like automations and self-service, you've already improved your efficiency by about 80%, right? Because instead of like one, you could take 5 or 6 conversations at the same time. And the customer, experience, not only does it not degrade, but it actually improves, right? You add automation on top of that. But when I say automation, I mean deep automation, not only FAQs. Yes, FAQs were very helpful. A lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a huge spike in terms of customer conversations. And a lot of people just wanted to know, can I fly? Right? What do I need to do when I land? Do I need to take any tests or anything like that? You don't have to speak to somebody to get that information. So a simple FAQ could actually work. But, as time progresses, the more you automate, enabling people to change their tickets, through conversational AIs, enabling people to get refunds, to understand their, flight status and those type of things. So things that are more specific to you as a consumer, you actually improve the efficiency, you continue improving the efficiency, right? And then suddenly, one conversation could go from $6 to, even a few cents because it's fully automated. So, were they prepared for it? I think they're still getting ready. I think there's still, a lot to be desired, but some of them have done, a great job in terms of, starting to put those things in place, making it easier for us to engage with them, making it easy for us to reach out to them, and also making themselves more efficient and not, crushing through the overload of customers reaching out to them.
Really, really interesting. One of the challenges a lot of us as passengers, but also as airlines, they've been burned by bad chatbot implementations in the past, which forces everyone to want to talk to quote unquote a real person and then spend 2 hours on the phone. So you have this vicious circle of waiting to speak with a real person for 2 hours. So how is AI plus automation plus human beings, in the contact center an answer to some of these real challenges?
So I'll first start by saying that I think you always need to allow your customers to get to an agent. right? Do not block it. They'll find a way, So, make sure that you kind of create it by design. It's going to help you and it's going to help the customers. So that's, the first thing that I would say. The second thing I think is, the one thing that we need to remember about automation is the more we do it, the better we get at it. There's a few, aspects to kind of customer service automation or what has been referred to as chatbots, right? And one of them is the ability to understand what we're saying, right? So free flowing, what we call conversational AI.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's considered, like, from a technical term, that's natural language understanding or natural language processing, right? And the more data there is, the better these chatbots become, right? In the past, one of the reasons why we hated them so much is because the training was done on us. Right? So you put something out there and it's like, okay, now let's train the bot, with our customers. So the bot is not going to understand, and somebody in the back end is going to train it to understand, and then eventually it will understand. But it really impacted us from an experience perspective, right? Because the first experiences that we might have had, especially if we were like the first ones to engage with these type of bots, weren't good. From a conversational perspective, we got a lot of I don't understand, back to the beginning of the flow, right? And that's a very frustrating, that could be a very frustrating experience. But the more, conversations are happening and the more automation is happening around these spaces, the more data there is, the more we can provide our customers with the ability to deploy language models that are good from the very beginning, right? So that's one thing that I think is, kind of changing from a automation and a chatbot perspective. The second piece around it is really how deep do you go, right? I think what we've seen, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, is that a lot of airlines just wanted to put something out there. Let's just block them. Let's just get them to wait a little bit. Let's just sit here for a second, while we take care of all of the other people that are waiting online so that we can get back to you, right? And I think, there's an understanding right now that, yes, you could put something basic and rudimentary in place, but one, make sure that you're saving the context. If you're asking somebody questions, make sure that those answers get to your agent, right? So they can actually start a conversation, because it's very frustrating, right? When you provide a lot of data and then you get to a conversation with the agent and you start from scratch. So make sure that, the context is saved. When you start that conversation with the agent, when it's handed over to an agent, you can continue the conversation. Maybe the last piece is really how, I mentioned kind of how deep do you go, but it's really how deep do you go from a, from a backend system integration. And it sounds like a fancy technical term, but at the end of the day, when you think about it, we all do it all of the time. Right? When we book a flight, when we buy a new shirt, right? Like, we don't need to speak to anybody. So yes, most of it today is still website oriented, right? But you could take the same type of interfaces and you can create conversational interfaces, to replace them, so that you can go down a certain flow as if you're speaking to a person, as if you're speaking to a human. And once you create those types of integrations, you could actually allow somebody to do things on their own. And we did a survey that's a stat that I love I love mentioning. But we did a survey, about a year ago, and we asked people, would you be willing to speak with a chatbot if it made your life easier? And 69% of people said yes, we'd actually prefer, to do things on our own if it made our lives easier. Right? Mm-hmm. If it's easy. If you're sending us in circles, we're just waiting, if we're talking about airlines, so we're just waiting for the landing, right? We don't want that. That's super frustrating. You're going to get a phone call from us while you're getting an email from us while we're trying to live chat you. So you better not take us down that path. And I think, consumers, and especially the more digital savvy consumers, are voting with their, fingers and with their feet in terms of, how brands are experiencing it, airlines are experiencing it.
That's so great. And you at Verint recently published a study, a guide to digital first engagement for the airline industry. It's quite a comprehensive guide. It's really almost a uh, uh, how-to for getting digital engagement right. It's actually an ebook you can download here, link in the bio in the tweet here. But tell us about what went into this guide and what are some of the takeaways?
So, like you said, I think it's a very pragmatical guide, right? We try to give like very specific, advice how to get started with what to care about and how to get started with, digital customer engagement. We also rely on a lot of our experience. So everything that you're going to read in this guide is based on, the kind of what we've seen from the airline sector. We've got quite a few airlines that are working with us, and with the data anonymized, we were able to actually see some of the trends. Now, the nice thing about it is that while you're looking at, how sometimes history kind of dictates the future. So, when you look at that airline, at that report, what we actually do is we start by looking at what are the volume drivers and what are the intents, what are actually people asking about, what should you be ready for, right? And what we've seen is that brands that can look into the future, right, and can get ready and be ready to support their customers where their customers are at, and in the areas that their customers are asking for, are the ones who are going to be more successful. So we kind of say a few things within this guide. One, there's a very interesting point about like what's happening right now, right? So if you're an airline executive, I really suggest that you just take a look at it, right? Because we kind of give a glimpse into how we think the future is going to look like and what are the things that people are going to be asking about. And one of the interesting things about it, I mentioned to you that we had our annual customer event last week not last week, the week before, with thousands of people gathering together, talking about customer engagement and one workforce and how to bring all of the workforce together. And I had a very interesting conversation with a few of the one low-cost airline and one traditional airline, so Volaris out of Mexico and Delta. And it was really interesting to hear, how they're thinking about it and what they're getting ready to. And it was amazing. This report was released not too long ago, but it was really amazing to hear that these are exactly the things that they're planning for, right? These are exactly the things that they're struggling with, right? Those intents. So, if you have a few minutes, I really urge you to look at it. Right, but then at the end of that document, what we do is we give a few pointers, like what should you be what should you be looking at, right? We say that data, very important. The past predicts the future. If we had spikes, we had a spike in March 2020. That was when people came out and said, "Oh, we want what's happening with our flights? We want refunds. What's going to happen with our what's going to happen with all the money that we've put into it?" Right? And then you go into, the year after, people started asking about, okay, refunds. Yeah, it seems like it's going to be over soon. So what do we do? How do we book our flights? What do we do with it? We want to get ready, right? We want to get ready for the summer and so on. Then you get to September, right? It's already, okay, so now we want to do it. How do we do it, right? And by the way, the very interesting fact is that some of the things that consumers wanted, the pandemic really changed the environment for those airlines, because, think about just, the simplest example. Think about how much money they're holding right now in their books, right? Because they've got all of those credits. So the airlines actually want us to fly right now. They wanted they want to make it easy for us, right, to actually book our flights, because they've got a ton of liability on their books, right? So and they're trying to figure out, how do we make it easier for people to do that? How do we make it more, simpler for people to actually do that? So we say, look at the data, look at the intents, automate those intents, make it simple for people to actually, get to an agent, but also make it simple for those who want to self-serve to self-serve. And through that, you're going to do two things. You're going to improve your customer experience for your customers, and you're going to reduce your cost and increase your efficiency.
Such a great point. We have to break this sort of cycle we're in now, which is largely triage unhappy customers, unhappy employees, and equal more unhappy customers. And I think happy employees mean happy customers, and happy flight attendants, pilots. We're really all stressed out, and so breaking this vicious circle is so important. What's next for you? You have any travel plans this summer? Getting on any planes by any chance?
Yeah, so just got back from Orlando, and we are planning. Finally, we love travel. I love traveling, and I love traveling with.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? That's true. And I love traveling with my family. I've got two teenagers who love seeing the world. And I think over the last 2 years, it was pretty difficult. We were all cooped up, we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't travel. So I think everybody is really excited about being able to go out and travel and fly. So yes, we've got a few very cool things planned. And so far, I got to tell you, from a personal standpoint, my experience has been pretty good, from an airline perspective. In terms of booking the flights, changing them if I need to change them, and just kind of the overall experience. Yes, it can change, but it's really nice that although we didn't fly for the last 2 years, the status hasn't changed, right? So they've kept it, right? So which I think is great. So if you're a frequent flyer and you've got a certain level of status, right, that you've worked very hard to get to, or you flew a lot to get to, I think it's very important that the airlines are keeping that, and then just making it easy to use the credits and doing it on your own, right? Using parts of credits. Sometimes you've got some credits from flights, but that you've had in the past, but you don't want to use all of it. It was almost impossible to do it on your own. Now, more and more airlines are making it easy to do that. So I think there's a lot of through challenges comes innovation, comes standardization, and I think all of the airlines are realizing that they really have to push it forward. They really have to go back to investing. You mentioned, like, every time we speak, you share your thoughts about how back behind they are in terms of the the technologies that they're using, especially as it compares to some of the other industries. And I totally agree with that opinion. So, but those challenges, they force them to move forward. They really force them to look at things differently.
Well, let's hope that this pandemic has a silver lining, which is that many industries, particularly the airline industry, will emerge stronger and more resilient, and with better, customer experiences, better customer service, and it will be a sea change. And I think no small part due to technology like that from Verint and Conversocial and others, helping airlines to reinvent themselves. Well, thanks so much for joining and chatting and sharing the amazing ebook that you created based on firsthand research. And I'd encourage folks to sign up and follow you on Twitter. We'll be following your travels this summer and beyond. Well, thanks so much, Ido. Good seeing you again.
Evan, you as well. Thank you. Always fun to speak with you. And have a great summer.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.